So the last thing that can impact your focus is the focus drive mode. Cameras generally have single shot mode, which means that when you press the shutter button down, the camera will only take one shot, and it's not tracking focus. And then they also have servo, which is on Canon's AI servo, or AFC, which is autofocus continuous on Nikon. And then single shot mode is AFS on Nikon. If you are taking a portrait of somebody, or if you're taking a picture of something that doesn't move, like a landscape, or my cat when he's eating a lot of food, or something like that, you just don't need to track anything. You're basically just focusing in one point. Use single shot mode, focus, take your shot. If you're taking a picture of something moving, like sports, any kind of sports, animals that are moving, if you go on safari, if you're with Napoleon Dynamite and you guys are chasing a liger, anything like that, you would want to use your continuous focus mode. What the continuous focus mode does is it locks focus on whatever it is you're tracking, and then the focus mode, or the focus motor in the lens, continues to run and tries to maintain focus on that moving liger, ninja, whatever it is that you're tracking. A couple caveats to this are, first of all, you have to make sure that you keep your focus point over whatever you're tracking. Some cameras have the ability to use like a group of focus points over what you're tracking, and if your person, whatever, moves out of the original point, it will actually hand off focus to that other point. Some cameras you can actually only use one point and it won't hand it off. It really depends on the camera. Really, with servo, that's the only time I will ever use more than one focus point. I shoot surfing a lot. That's one of the things I shoot, and sometimes it's really hard to track people riding waves from really far away, so occasionally I will have my body set up to have a single point in the middle with 4 expansion points around it, so that way if I am holding a really long lens and a heavy body and I'm tracking, if I drop my person, which sounds really kind of dangerous, out of focus on one point, the camera will attempt to hand it off to the other point. So yeah, make sure that you're using the correct mode. One other thing is that if you're using servo on something that's not moving, that can cause problems, because what happens is the focus motor keeps running on the lens as long as you have servo on and you have the shutter button half pressed, or if you're using back button focus, the back button pressed. So that can cause blur. It's trying to look for something to track, but there's nothing that you're tracking because your subject is not moving. What else do I want to talk about? Just so you know, the other thing too is that the way that cameras detect focus through the viewfinder is that they look for contrast. So if you're trying to focus on something that doesn't have a lot of contrast, like if you're looking at, I don't know, a white flower that's light colored in the middle, or a wall, or the sky, or whatever, sometimes the camera's going to have a hard time focusing on those things because there's not enough contrast. Sometimes if there's not enough contrast, it actually will pick something that has enough contrast either in front of or behind where you're trying to focus, just because that's where it's finding the contrast. That's actually also why it's bad to use the camera automatically picking the focus points, because what the camera is going to do is it's going to look for whatever has the most contrast, and that may be in front of or behind where you're focusing. The other thing is that if you're taking a picture of a bunch of people and you have your camera set up to use multiple focus points, you may look through the viewfinder and it may look like your camera is focusing on like 5 people's faces because there's a bunch of squares lit up, but I gotta tell you something. It's actually not focusing on all those faces at the same time. What it's doing is your focus mode has all those points activated, but it's actually only using one. It does not matter if you have all 53 or 61 or whatever points active. It's only going to use one at the end of the day. So if you're taking a group photo, 5 different focus points light up in your camera, it's not focusing on Uncle Bob and Mary Sue Bob and Uncle Jim Bob and Uncle Lou Bob and all those people. What it's doing is it's picking that point that it can find out of all those 5 that has the most contrast and focusing on that. DSLRs don't really have face detection through a viewfinder like your phone does. So all those people aren't necessarily going to be in focus if your depth of field isn't enough. A lot of people don't get that. It's really not focusing on all those people at the same time. One other thing. So if you've tried all these things and your camera really isn't still focusing, or you're having problems with a lens, a lot of people say, well, you know, my lens is consistently focusing in front of where I want it to focus to, or behind where I want it to focus, and I don't get it. I don't understand why. This can happen. It's possible. It's called either front focusing or back focusing, depending on whether your lens is focusing in front of or behind where you want it to focus. To really verify whether it's doing that, you can do a focus test. You can actually Google how to do focus tests, and there's a lot of different methods online that you can find using rulers or whatever. Sometimes you just know that it's doing it because it's consistently doing it. You don't even want to do a test, or you don't even have to, because every single shot you take is like that. But sometimes it's hard to tell because, you know, maybe you shoot wide a lot and you're not sure if it's your error or the lens's error. So you can do a focus test. One thing that I've done a lot of times is actually put 3 batteries staggered on a table or even on the floor. I'll lay them on the floor here, put my camera on the floor, lay down, and focus on the different batteries, and see if my camera is actually focusing where I put the focus point. So if you do a test and you find out that your camera or your lens is actually not focusing the way that it should, if it's really focusing in front of or behind where you want it to, there's a few things that you can do. A lot of camera bodies have the ability to micro adjust, meaning you can actually adjust the specific lens to the body so that the focus is dead on. My best advice is, if you don't know if your camera has this feature, look in the manual. I know all the Canon ones that do, none of the Rebels do. The 50D does, the 60D does not, 70D does, both 7Ds. The 5D2, 5D3, 6D, all the 1DXs. I can't remember if the 5D Classic does. Nikon's, all the full frame bodies do. I think the D7000 series does. I'm not sure about any of the other ones. And I'm not sure any of the other camera brands how that works. How you actually micro adjust your lens is there's a menu that you go into in your camera that will let you usually do like a plus or minus on the lens. It will let you either pull the focus closer to the camera itself or farther away from the camera itself, which will adjust front or back focusing. The way that I found that's most accurate to do this is actually use either a program or a system. I have a program that's called Rycan Focal, which you actually install on your computer. It's a paid program, and you plug your camera into your computer, and you can put a focus chart on a wall, or you can go outside, print them out, and it takes a bunch of photos and then it analyzes them, and it basically tells you what adjustment your camera needs to be at, or your lens on that camera. I have adjusted all my lenses to both my bodies. They all require a little bit of adjustment, except for I think one lens on one of my bodies. So, you know, for me to get texture on focus, I always do that because I'm kind of a focus Nazi. There's also a free method called Dot Tune. If you Google Dot Tune, you can find a really good thread, I think, on the Fred Miranda forums that tells you how to use it, and there's actually a couple of videos. I've used that method because, unfortunately, my Rycan didn't work very well after I upgraded my Mac to Mavericks last year. There was a lot of wonky issues, and it's kind of been on and off with how well it's been working, so I kind of switched over to the Dot Tune for the most part because it was getting really annoying when my calibrations were putting mid-calibration. So that you can do yourself. You don't have to pay for anything. You do have to print off a focus chart. If you have a printer, you know, you can do that. But otherwise, it's just, you know, it probably takes about 5 to 10 minutes on the lens, depending on how quick you are and, you know, reading the instructions, getting what you have to do. It's really not hard, I promise. If I can do it, you can do it. So that's all I have to say about focus for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment on the blog or the video, or send me an email. Okay? Thank you. Bye.